Yo gamers, what's up? It's Goldemon12 here, back with another Zenless Zone Zero video. And before you ask about the hat, my hair's getting too long. Anyways, I'm not gonna do the usual spiel about how I sit here and yap for 20 minutes about not having time for content, all that good stuff. We're just gonna hop right into it. So today we've got the Prydwen update to the Zenless Zone Zero tier list, and I have some thoughts. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the placements. Well, I say a lot. There's not too many characters, so it's really a few placements. But yeah, they made a lot of changes, so let's look at them. The main one to point out is the fact that agents are now M6 for 4 stars, or A ranks. And this obviously, for a couple of them, are going to drastically shift the position. Primarily Lucy. Lucy's one of those characters that I don't think shines until she's at least M2, and then she becomes very good and on par with the other supports, right? So there's a bit going on there with Lucy in particular, to where she unironically could jump a tier or 2 even, just because of her M2, allowing her to be on par with other supports. It's a really weird kit design, the way they did that, but regardless, I just thought I'd point that out for the start. But yeah, that's the main thing. A couple of S ranks did get adjusted. Now, I'm not going to read all of this, but the main thing that they're pointing out here is that Anomaly and Disorder teams have, received some support recently. That is true. However, I do think they're possibly a bit overrating it, and this could be seen due to popularity, because once again, and I don't know why they do this, they use usage rates for some of the rankings, and I think that's a terrible statistic. It's just a bad idea. It skews data massively based on favoritism and other various things. It should never be used for tier lists. But with that caveat aside, let's look at the actual tier list. And is there anything else that's worth pointing out? Yeah, niche. Oh yeah, they put a couple people on Fraud Watch, Ellen, G1, and Soukaku. I don't think any of them should be on Fraud Watch, but again, I'll get to that. And then obviously Caesar's been added to the list as of last update, or I guess last half of the update, because we're now in the new half. So yeah, as you can see here, they have of course moved some tiers around. Ellen, Joe, and G1 are on Fraud Watch. To be honest with you, I don't think G1 should be on Fraud Watch. Ellen is debatable because her team is slower than most of the other teams typically, but again, it really depends on your matchup, right? The current one favors more so fire and like physical, because obviously this is the two more recent characters. But yeah, again, there is an ice part of it, so Ellen still gets use, but like I don't know if she should be on Fraud Watch, because at least for me, free to play level, and I believe they consider these lists with without signature weapon on the S ranks, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. S rank characters are Mindscape 0, A rank characters are Mindscape 6. E1 of the standard S rank W engines. These options are just meant. Yeah, okay. DPS. I'm trying to think. They don't use the 3 best teams. All characters are max level with S rank disk drives. All characters are assessed with good but not perfect substats. S rank characters all have 0 must. Okay, so it's of the standard W engines. Yeah, so this is with standard W engines. And this is one of the things with Jane Doe, her next best option is like a 4-star weapon, because none of the other races 5-star is not really good unless you're like massively stacking pin, and even then it's still like worse than the attack buffing we have currently. I don't feel like my Jane Doe is nearly as omnipresent, I guess you could put it, as like G1. Like here's the thing, Jane obviously is being favored too with all like the physical resistances and everything, but my G1 still blitzes through most content whenever she's put on there with Caesar. So like I don't know why they're putting these two on Fraud Watch when, first off, everybody benefits from Caesar. I was too late to miss the mark on like uploading the Should You Summon video. I do apologize about that. I don't know if I'll upload the one for Burnice. I might, because I've like reformatted my criteria and everything. But point is, Caesar has like the biggest impact across like the game as like any unit we've had so far, and she's obviously enabling new comps and buffing a lot of old comps, so on and so on, right? She's having all this impact across teams, right? I don't think Ellen is performing significantly worse than before. Obviously, it's not going to be like top tier, because again, Jane has set like a new level with the amount of instant damage she can do right at the start of battle with assault procs. But like, I don't think it's that much more than G1 and Ellen, because again, you can look at the math, right, in terms of like count the build-up. Once you get them stunned, if we're going off like to a race, you're hitting for like a 1 mil assault proc, and then you're gonna be 3 more seconds, like another 1 more assault proc, like you're gonna build up. And then like over the course of time, you can do like what, like 25% less damage on like a Ellen, for example, in that same rotation. Like again, I'm not saying that she's not better than Ellen G1. It's just that for my personal use of using all these units, right, I don't think these two should be on Fraud Watch. They feel like they perform the same. And granted, it is, as they do say, a skill-based game, and each character has a different playstyle. Having played them, I don't think Jane at like M0, like without her signature weapon, is that much better. With her signature weapon though, because it's one of the few Anomaly weapons that actually give rate buildup, and that's really, really powerful for Anomalies, I do think she's better than them. Because that rate buildup is like the biggest part of her weapon in terms of like actual damage gain. I don't know, it's hard to calculate for that, to be honest, because it's going to depend on the enemy's resistances and all that stuff. But the actual gain she gets from her weapon is insane because of how much buildup matters and multiplies into the other stats for, you know, Anomaly characters. And so with her weapon, I do think she does drastically perform over these two, because realistically, these two don't get that big of a boost from their weapon. I don't know if they've added the new... Yeah, so like there's a new 4-star that's like Ellen's like second best weapon. That's besides the point. It's like both G1 and Ellen's. It's like slightly better than Starlight in terms of practical use and ease of use, but regardless, on a free-to-play level, they feel about the same. But I do think once you get the weapon, she's like way better. Or like M1, for example. The weapon's more important, but just like as an example. As for Burnice, which is like the main important thing and change that they've done, not change, but addition, because she's the newest unit, I don't think she's worthy of being at T0 because of her limitations for teams. Now, this is something that I don't think everybody is... I don't know if people... Like, how do I word this? I don't know if people are really considering this, but her team options are quite limited as of right now, because she wants to be used exclusively with Anomaly characters, right? She needs to have somebody else like Jane Doe, Brace, or Piper to actually have her output for max damage with Disorder, right? And that in itself, I don't think does it, like it. I don't think that specifically makes her not T0. I just think she's not bringing enough to the table to make her T0 like standalone. Like if you put her in her best team, who's doing the bulk of the damage? It's Jane Doe, because Jane is, you know, the one proccing the actual like initial disorder off of the burn that you apply, and you're getting like the high raw damage from Jane, and then you're getting the extra, like, you know, 400k plus whatever disorder from Burnice. But this is something that's possible with other characters that are Anomaly, right? Burnice in herself, the main special thing she's bringing is the off-field application. Now, granted, you can definitely bring up something with like how she synergizes with Lucy in terms of getting additional procs and even more damage, sure. But I don't think Burnice is strong enough in of herself to be T0. I do think she's really good. I just think she needs to be moved slightly down because she has a lack of synergy with the wider game. Because realistically, she only has synergy with like 3 other DPS characters. And because of how the nature of Anomaly is, it's kind of like being super effective against the type. Like, oh, both my resistances match. Awesome. I'm now going to do effectively like 40% more damage. Oh, they're both resistant. I'm doing 40% less. It's, to me, it feels like they matter. Resistances for Anomaly matter way more than like a regular DPS, where they can go like neutral, or like, obviously you want to go positive, but it's not going to be like a 40% bonus. You need to have in a disorder team, like both of them being weak to that is going to get an even better effect, because now both your disorders are doing, you know, more damage, right? If that makes sense. I'm probably not explaining it right, but it's just like my thought process of how like Anomaly plays a role in the game and how it actually functions in the game. And so Burnice alone, without the current, what we currently have, I don't think is strong enough to be considered a T0. And they do even mention in their I think it's criteria. Did they not do synergy? Because for Star Rail they do flexibility. That's what I'm trying to think. Let's see. Yeah. How many characters discovered on the unit? Okay. Amongst them, and huge disorder reactions. Usually kids focus on improving the strength frequency. The Anomaly locations, the bulk of their damage stems from finding them DPS. Okay, so major influence: the character's anomaly damage contribution, elemental disorder with the best possible team to achieve max star rating and shoot defense, ease of frequency of anomaly application on one or multiple enemies. Okay, so yeah, if we consider the ease specifically and her actual disorder damage, because the timer is what's getting you that timer increase for burn is what's getting you that massive disorder proc. Yeah, obviously it makes sense why she's placed so high. It's just me personally, I don't necessarily agree of putting her up there with Jane Doe, because Jane Doe works as both. She works as a disorder carry and a hyper carry because she's, you know, they just boom instant one hit damage. Burnice relies on her teammates to be able to get off of all her damage, right? So yeah, again, that's really here nor there. It's not a big deal, but I do think she should be moved down. Hopefully I explained that correctly. I might have explained it poorly, but regardless. And then as for Zhiyuan and Ellen, I still think they're fine here. If anything, I wouldn't move Zhiyuan down personally. She's kind of whack to play in some cases with certain enemies and like stun timers. If we had a stun character that extended the timer, that'd be really good for her specifically. But she does get benefit from like some of the other newer characters, and like how Caesar allows her to get easier damage rotations off compared to Nicole, so on and so on, right? Ellen, she does feel like a little bit weaker with her like quote unquote best team being Ellen, Vaughn, and Soukaku. Maybe that's just because of how my skill is with Vaughn. Again, I haven't had Vaughn as long as some of my other characters, and so I'm not the most used to his kit. But like, while I do think, or obviously Chingy's way better than Vaughn, with Vaughn in particular, I do think he feels a little weird to use over other options. So even while on paper he's got the highest damage gain with those three together, a lot of people use Caesar instead because she's bringing you a similar damage gain while having the ease of use and really fast stunning. So I need to try more of Ellen Joe with Caesar, but I can see why in terms of like time, like Soukaku takes a long time to get all her skills off, Vaughn takes a certain duration on field time, and Ellen wants to be on field, but she can't because the other two teammates. And so I can see why in her optimal setup she would be lowered compared to the other top DPS. So that actually makes sense. This is the one that I don't agree with right here. Dropping Nekomata down below Soldier 11. I don't think either one of these characters are necessarily bad, and especially, again, given their list, they're not bad, right? They're just tiers below the main DPS, because limited characters in this game are really strong. Like, there's a really strong gap for these limited characters, right? But I don't think Nekomata is that bad, right? I haven't looked at Mr. Poke's video, but I know he did one over this, and like the thumbnail's like Yang Ching next to Nekomata, like it's the same picture. I don't think Nekomata is that bad. I just think that people don't like. Obviously, Jane is a better physical DPS. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think Nekomata is necessarily bad. She still outputs really good damage and has some good burst damage, right? Now, Soldier 11, this one's debatable. She has received a massive buff with having Caesar as a stunner, can replace Kaleda. Even though Kaleda has pretty fast stuns when used optimally, you're going to get a much larger damage bonus when you actually run her with Caesar, right? So Soldier obviously is going to get a bonus, but so is Nekomata. Nekomata having another physical teammate is going to allow her to proc assaults faster, and so you will be able to get her passive and get more damage out faster, right? And I don't think her performance has drastically dropped. Like I don't think Soldier 11 is necessarily that much better than her. I kind of think they should be on the same tier. Now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's like something that's making Soldier 11 drastically stronger than Nekomata, but at least for me, in terms of like what I've used from the units, what I've seen from the units, I think they're about the same level, to be honest with you, right? I don't think Nekomata is that bad or like that much worse than everyone else. And what looks really bad here is seeing Corrin drop down the low, because I remember people at the start of the game were like hyping up Corrin. They're like, oh, she's actually really good, right? She's like on par with some of these other characters. And now it's, and Billy was like seen as the worst, right? And now it's been reversed. So like Corrin has dropped to the bottom, Billy has gone up and has been seen as really good, and Anton's just like stayed where he's at, right? Which, granted, I don't like how Anton plays. He does not feel that strong. I really, like, genuinely, it's the forces I have a problem with, if anything. Like, I don't think any of them are as good as like Nekomata. I mean, maybe there's a case for Billy, because you can get some really high like physical damage, like burst off when you have his ultimate, like double skill and like all that stuff, kind of like Nekomata, except with less restriction. Although his weapon does want you to be a certain distance. It's a whole thing. So like Billy in some cases can have the damage because his is all burst related, so you can maximize it with like Nicole. But Anton having the prolonged damage does hurt him negatively, I would say. And I just don't feel he performs at the same level as like Nekomata or like Billy. And then Corrin, it's just sort of the case where her damage just happens to be lower. Like she's not bad, I would say, but her damage and speed is just way lower than everybody else's. Like that's just a thing. Like there is some synergy with like M6 Lucy, but it's just unfortunate that's like more people have played the game, the more it's like Corrin doesn't feel the best to play for a lot of people. And I do like the chainsaw gameplay, don't get me wrong, but she's not like outputting the most insane damage in comparison to these other characters that can just do way more damage. And she's also got, again, I would say a different playstyle than a lot of these other like top tier characters. And again, it's sort of just like how stuns and everything function in this game. You gotta have characters that can maximize their damage within certain windows. Corrin having that long charge up time, requiring that long field time, does hurt her, especially because you have to go through a full like chainsaw thing to get a burst off where you're gonna get all your big damage, and you have to just basically DOT the enemy down. And so it's just that she doesn't play well with a lot of the current content, right? If we had, like, as I said, a stunner that would extend stun duration, it'd be really good for some of these characters like Ji-Yuan, like Corrin, because then they'd be able to get more attacks off during the duration, while your other burst characters are going to start going off cooldown, right? So again, it's going to depend on like enemy types, but I really don't agree with this like lower rank of these DPS. I do think Nekomata performs better than them, and that the other 4-stars are possibly being overrated. And so yeah, moving on to Anomaly DPS, I already commented a bit on this. I do think Burnice is being a bit hyped up a little bit too much. Like she's really good, don't get me wrong, but it's like I think it might be a little too far for like a list like this. It could be one of those things where usage rate is going to affect, you know, the character statistics. The main thing with the other Anomaly characters being Piper and Grace here is that Grace is in a weird position to where she has to be on field to proc her electric anomaly, and so she loses that synergy with the other two anomalies. This is the main thing that's so good about Burnice, is that she's off field and can still apply anomaly, and that's what makes her so drastically, you know, better than the other anomaly characters in that regard, right? There is obviously going to be the synergy with her and Piper being in the same team, so you can run whatever other support you want. But specifically with Grace, she does have the limitation of being currently lightning and then requiring to be on field for her damage. And so while in a team of like Burnice plus Grace can be really good because you can swap between them and apply a lot of disorder, a team of Jane Doe and Grace is going to be way worse because, again, of how disorder damage flip-flops, and because Grace also needs to be on field, whereas every second you lose of not having Jane Doe on field, you're losing massive DPS, right? And so I can understand why putting her here, especially because realistically the only thing it's the realistic thing for anomaly characters is that they're only going to be there to apply their anomaly and then go away, right? Jane Doe is doing the same thing, but she's on field to do crits, right? That's why Piper is this much worse. Now, granted, I haven't used Grace enough to really say it's like if it should be lowered or not. I think it's fine where it's at. Piper, it's the same thing. Jane just performs tiers above her. Again, you could definitely argue both of these guys like one down and have these characters like multiple tiers above because of how big of an increase Jane Doe is over other characters. But at least according to Prydwen, Piper is out damaging Nekomata, right? So maybe I just haven't seen enough of Piper to really see this. But as I've said, like I think they're not like, I wouldn't say usage rates, but like I think there's not enough credit given to what Nekomata does, and that maybe there's too much credit given to characters like Piper. But then again, I'd have to look at clear times to more accurately assess that. It's just like these two are in like a gray area for me personally, and that's why I'm mentioning all this. But yeah, that's totally fine for the other ones. Makes perfect sense. Right. Again, they're very, very powerful. We might see more use of Grace in the future with Yanagi, or what's her name? Yanagi. I keep saying the name wrong, but Yanagi. The new electric anomaly character. It could potentially get use of Grace if you do like a double shock team with her, which could be good, but it's like you'd be doing like maybe double shock Caesar or like some other combination, like depending on Yanagi's kit. They could be like a force disorder kit or something like that, to where you could do like triple shock with like Qingyi to get your stun multiplier up and then do big damage during their stun, whatever it may be. It depends on her kit, but a lot of these characters are going to be affected by another anomaly, and at least to me it reasons that It's another Anomaly right after Burnice. They're probably going to have some sort of synergy, right? So with that in mind, it's probably valid to keep Burnice up here at the top. But I'm very curious how these two positions will be affected by a third 5-star Anomaly to release, right? So yeah, again, here nor there, but very interested to see what the next Anomaly is going to do, because I think she'll be really good. So we'll see about that. As for the stun characters, this one's pretty self-explanatory. Qingyi is the best stunner in the game, just obvious, right? Lycan's been Lycan has been dethroned. His primary use is going to be in the ice team, right? Because in other teams, you can really just use Caesar, right? So even in his own team, he's kind of replaced by Caesar regardless. But Vaughn's still a solid unit. He's going to be the best standard stunner for actual raw damage, right? Polita can stun really fast, but if anybody's used a well-invested Ambi, Ambi is still really good and stuns fast, right? And Kaleda isn't bringing too much to the table besides that, right? So yeah, the stunners are pretty self-explanatory. We're gonna see. I can predict that we're gonna see them fall even more once we get more stunners, like a lighter, for example, put into the game. Because again, if you've been paying attention to like the kits, the gap between 5 stars and like these starting 4 stars is massive. All right, like you can see right here, they're saying there's a 1-tier difference between these guys. I'm telling you right now, the more where this game's gonna go on, this gap is gonna get bigger. Because we're gonna get new setups for a lot of these characters. New buffs. Again, like Lighter, for example, he's a fire stunner. He's already going to take Koleda's position just for that alone, right? So yeah, there's going to be big shifts, I'd say, in the future for that specifically. But yeah, stunners makes perfect sense. As for supports, so since I believe the last time I've done this, they've actually moved Ben to support section, which is fine, because realistically he is more of a support, but he does do decent stun, especially once you get him M6. As for the actual supports, you can see Caesar's at the top, and they've moved Soukaku down to 0.5. They've moved Nicole. Nicole was actually moved up before they did this change. And then Lucy, because she's M6, has also been moved up. And Seth has actually been moved down, because I remember they had, I believe Seth was actually higher up, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think Seth was higher up, but I think because of the M6 change that they did, that they've swapped positions with Lucy and Seth, or whatever it may be. And the reason for this is because Seth's dupes don't really do too much, like, to make him crazier as a support. They're all, like, damage dupes. One of them is Anomaly buildup, but the other one is, like, raw damage for him and gives him, like, guaranteed crits on the 6th, enhanced basic attack hit or whatever. So, like, there's, his actual dupes don't do too much for him, but Lucy's dupes do a lot for her specifically. So you're getting the attack multiplier increase, which allows you to shift your build because you now need less attack for your actual buff to max out. There's the M4, which is going to give you crit damage for your crit-based characters. This M6 is going to give you extra build-up and longer buff duration and synergy with characters like Burnice, right? And, just additional damage, right? Lucy on her own is already doing pretty good damage. I was doing like a little test run for my Lucy because I've got her on a hybrid damage build where even with her signature weapon, which is an energy recharge weapon, I was able to get her to hit for like 200k per boar rain. And I'm talking about her ultimate, right? So each hit of the ult was doing like 200k, which is going to be like a 600k ultimate, which is insane damage from a support character, mind you. A support doing over 500,000 damage, insane. So like Lucy, it makes sense because of how impactful her dupes are. Very, very strong. I do think she's deserving of this rank because on the optimal build, right? And I've sort of got it like written down because I was doing math for this. But Lucy can give you like flat attack, and then depending on what rank your weapon is, you'll get X% of team attack, which is going to be huge because combat attack is massive in this game in terms of like actual damage you output, because it's going to be on top of basically everything else. So yeah, if you do have her weapon, Lucy performs very, very well. Nicole, I'm a bit iffy on because of how short her duration is, even with like dupes and other stuff. She's still really good though, and allows you to hit really high damage. And a lot of her ranking is because of Yuan, because she's got perfect synergy with her, and so that makes total sense why she's here. Again, up to 40% defense down, another like 25% damage bonus for ether characters, another like 10 to like 20 damage bonus for your weapon, right? And if you're M6, you get extra crit. Right, the grouping you get, especially at M4, like Nicole's providing so much for general use and can basically be thrown in anywhere, even like off of even if you don't activate the additional ability, right? So like any burst scenario, Nicole's great in. She does suffer a little by having these anomaly characters that need to have so much field time, and it's because of the short duration. You can't perfectly match up procs, but you can. If we get like an ether anomaly in the future, maybe Nicole be like even ranked even higher, but it really just depends on like when you can actually proc the effect, right? But yeah, she's very good and deserving of that rank. Soukaku on Fraud Watch, I do think is interesting because I don't think she deserves to be put on Fraud Watch. I think she's really good. The main drawback to her is the fact that she's kind of slow and has build up. Now, for me personally, I don't have that as a problem because my Soukaku is built as a DPS build, which is actually pretty solid. Soukaku has some decent multipliers on her damage and some decent days build up, right? And if we just take a second to actually look in the game, right? My Soukaku does actually hit her stat minimums of 2,500 attack, right? And we've got some decent crit stats. I had more crit, but I gave it back to my Ellen, so my Ellen's looking a little better. And I actually think somebody else might have taken her gear recently, but that's besides the point. If you do level up her skills, again, she can do decent damage. I know there's the whole DPS Soukaku build, but for her as a support, she's giving you so much, right? You're gonna get the like 20% ice damage. You're gonna get the 1,000 attack, right, from her max buff. You can get another attack bonus from her actual weapon, so that's gonna be like up to 8 to 16 damage attack percent, which is again combat attack, huge, right? You'll get 10% ice res down. You can of course equip her with the relic set that's going to give you another 15% damage bonus. So you're going to get a lot of damage increases and damage amps from Soukaku that is actually on paper, at least for Ellen, better than Caesar, right? And if you again list all that out, is still better than Caesar because you're getting that 1,000 attack that's equal, and you're going to get the combat attack on top, which is going to typically outbeat that extra 25% damage percent that Caesar has, right? Not to mention the fact that again, if you do run her with ice, you're gonna get that extra ice res down, right? So Soukaku has some very potent abilities. I don't necessarily think she should be on Fraud Watch, right? The main drawback to her is that she's single target buffing versus basically everyone else on this list. I mean, Seth too is for the most part, but if you do get his like M1, you can kind of extend it to multiple characters. But regardless, the main drawback of her is single target buffing. So because of that, you get less synergy with the other DPSs, and again, there's the whole duration where she takes like 5 years to do her attack, so G1 loses out on it. But I don't think she's that much worse than these characters, to be honest with you, especially if we're seeing her at M6. But that's really here nor there. And I know I made like the like one guide video I have right now is like on Soukaku. And like it's I'm not like I know it might sound biased, but I do think genuinely she is just on par with these other ones, and I don't think she should be lowered. But to be fair, if every other team is performing better and they're just not using Soukaku, I guess that makes sense, right? But like on paper, she's still, you know, packing a lot of punch, or whatever the phrase goes. You get what I'm saying, right? She still provides a lot. It's just the single target buffing and the duration is what kind of guts her over that, right? And also, there's another thing I gotta mention. The dupe that gives her a chance to generate an extra stack changes things massively. So her duration is already like the longest duration in the game. It's lasting like over 28 seconds. Like, it's insane. But it's this one where there's a 15% chance they gain an extra vortex. This is a really, really strong ability that honestly procs way more than 15%. I don't know what the hell like happens, but I swear to you, it procs way more than 15%. When I come in there, wait, but okay, when I use Soukaku, I swear to God that procs way more often than 15%. But regardless, I don't know. I don't think she should be put on Fraud Watch necessarily. But yeah, that's really nor there. Seth is still really good. Nothing's changed with him. He just again is single target buffing, which can hurt him in some scenarios. But the main thing here is that he is way more restricted than anybody else because of everybody being raw attack. Everybody can get damage bonus. Seth being AM only really helps Anomaly characters. So this does kind of make sense in terms of his actual value. And his shield is not anything too crazy. You can get some decent shielding out of it, but you know, outside of that, he's not doing too much. His days is kind of whatever. His Anomaly build-up is pretty nice, which can be good for a Jane team specifically. but he does lose value outside of Jane teams, I would say, because you really could just run a different character at that point, right? Because if you're running like a Hyper Burnice team, you really should just be running Caesar for like the stun, if anything. And that's the main thing. Because Caesar's a hybrid character who can stun and buff, she kind of just cannibalizes the role of a lot of support characters and is basically the optimal way to run almost every team, right? If you need a second stunner, for example, which isn't really a thing you need, but for example, like if you want a second stunner, if you are trying to run an Anomaly Disorder team, even off element Caesars are even it should be like this. Even on element, Caesar's still the way to go, because while you may lose a bit of assault damage for like Jane Doe, you're still getting a stunner off, and so you can still run someone like Burnice to get that disorder and do big damage. That's just like her best team, right? And it even goes in the other way. If you're off element, even better, because that means the other two characters can maximize their elements more and get 100% of the application and still get a stunner on the team because Caesar's stunning, right? So she's just like so omnipresent for like the game that it like other characters like Seth don't get as much opportunity, unless of course you're running a Hyper Jane Doe where you just run both of them. But like it just makes sense. Again, Rina, people hated me for saying this, but it was just true. At the start of the game, Rina was just not it. She was just not it. Every other support was better than her, right? And this is the case right now. You can see it reflected in this list, right? But regardless, people still got mad at me. Rina isn't bad. In fact, I think she's good. It's just everyone else better than her, right? Pin ratio in itself is not anything too crazy unless it's stacked, because it's defense penetration, right? In terms of the defense multiplier, you get, X% more damage, so on and so on, right? You get the idea. I do think Rina is going to see a resurgence whenever Inagi comes out, because she is an Anomaly character. And so if we get a limited shock disorder character, obviously Grace is going to be really good because of her passive. This is the only thing that matters about her kit, is the 3-second shock duration and then the extra 10% shock damage. This is the biggest increase for your actual disorder damage. And so now you combine the timer duration for that plus Burnice's timer duration. Well, guess what? Now you both have 3 extra seconds on both disorders. Both your disorders are doing X% or X base multiplier more damage, right? So you're getting a massive increase by running those two together. You put Yanagi in slot 1, insane damage. The problem with this is Caesar still better to run over them? Because here's the thing. Another shock character in the team is going to eat up the main shock's Anomaly procs, and so you probably want to run her as attack in slot 6 instead of actually energy recharge or whatever it may be. But then on top of that, is the damage loss of Burnice's disorder better to run Yanagi as the main disorder character, right? Because you're not going to get buffed on both characters. Rina can buff both characters, but her duration is really short unless you got M1, right? And so at that point, you still want to stun. Do you just run Caesar for the stuns over Rina, even though she should arguably get more damage off? I don't know. There's going to be a bit of like theory crafting and actual like testing that needs to be done with a new Anomaly character to see who's going to be better overall for that team, Rina or Caesar. I do think it's going to be Caesar because of the stunning capabilities, but we'll see. But yeah, I do think with a new lightning Anomaly character, Rina is going to see some resurgence going on here. But yeah, it is just the case where she just doesn't perform at the same level as these other supports do. Granted, it is worth mentioning she's got she had some really high clear times early on for like what is it, Shiyu defense. So we'll see what happens in the future. But it's just like what I said way back when. Rina right now isn't that good, but she can be really good if we give her like extra ways to maximize her pin buffing, right? And then as for Ben's just outclassed. I mean, his counter is good. He can do good damage, but basically everywhere you run him, he's outclassed. Because if you want to run a fire support, well, first off, you're gonna run Caesar as the stunner in the team, right? So you get your shielding covered, your flexibility, your comfortability. You're gonna get your damage buffing. It's like, okay, well, I want crit buffing as well. Why don't I just run Lucy? If you have both of them at M6, you're gonna run Lucy anyways because you're gonna get a bigger attack buff. You're gonna get a bigger, stronger buff. You're gonna get crit damage buff. You're gonna get the extra damage from the boars, right? Because the boars are also gonna build up stun as well. Remember, those dudes be hitting all the time. They're doing damage as well. As much as people like Ben, he is completely outclassed by every single other character. It's just, it is what it is. Like you can hardly argue the stun benefit when you've got, you know, stunners like Caesar. Be like, oh, but the damage. Oh, but it's like Lucy's doing the damage, Seth's doing anomaly application, hell, Rena's doing anomaly application, Soukaku's doing damage. Nicole's the one who actually really isn't doing damage, but like Caesar's definitely doing damage. Like, it's just an unfortunate reality. Ben is completely outclassed, right? It just is what it is. Again, his stuns are nice. He can do good damage, but in Shiyu defense, which is where they're ranking this off, he's outclassed, right, by these other characters. It's just like, that's just what it is. So yeah, hopefully I explained all that well. I might have talked over myself. I might have repeated points. It is what it is, but I'm embracing the yap. It's what I do. As a like overall thoughts, right? I think it's pretty solid. I do disagree with a couple positions. Again, it's mainly this lower tier DPS I disagree with, and like the Burnice. It's really like she's good, but I don't know if she's as good as Jane, right? That's the main thing. Everything else for the most part makes sense. Glad to see Lucy is finally seeing her rep, because as I said before, what I've been saying, Lucy plus Caesar core is insane. It allows you to run literally whatever you want, and Lucy in herself is actually really good. Yeah, let me know what you want to see next. Like, subscribe to me on Twitch, all the good stuff, and maybe I'll do a Lucy guide next. I don't know. But yeah, see you guys later.